What is your nobody will ever believe this story? One time when I was a teenager I was playing pool with friends. The pizza arrived or whatever and I took one last shot just as everyone was leaving and sank like 5 balls. It was the single best move I have ever made in any game I have ever played, but no one saw it and there was no way to take credit for it without sounding like a liar. Was doing a service call at an equestrian farm. I went to the bathroom in the barn to take a leak. The door was slightly ajar and the light was off. I pushed open the door and hit the light only to see a goat dressed in a fleece vest eating toilet paper off the roll. He gave me this look like to say WTF are you looking at? I turned off the light and left. That's very on brand goat behavior. I once threw the inside of a pen at least 9 feet clear across a room and skewered a fly that was annoying me. Legit I felt like a ninja and have no way to prove it to anyone. Not gonna lie, it's probably my peak and it's all been downhill ever since. I was at a friend's off-grid cottage with our combined amount of 16 dogs. It is a 1200 acre property with over 2 kilometers of basically off-roading to get to the cottage itself, with very poor cell reception. We were out for a romp in the woods to take out a problem beaver dam. It diverted a river from draining into the lake and flooding the road instead. So the dang is absolutely massive, like a good 20 feet drop on one side. So we finally get through enough that water started pouring through and my friend realizes her key fob is missing. Cue massive panic. The other key fob is over a 3-hour drive away. One of her dogs that was up on the dam with us stuck his head into the moving water and pulled out the key fob. Had we not both witnessed it we would never have believed each other, and trying to tell other people what happened, with both of us able to tell the same story, is still met with disbelief. My ex, American, met him in the US, and my other ex, Dutch, met him 3 years later in Argentina, work at the same office in Amsterdam. They are colleagues. I found out cause I saw a FB post in which they were at the same office 2 years after me and Dutchie broke up, and I still live in Argentina. Also, some years ago, I was in a relationship with a guy. We lived together in a tiny apartment. The relationship ended in a terrible way. 4 years later, I started dating another guy. He takes me to his house. It was the apartment I used to share with my ex. And let me tell you, Buenos Aires is a huge city. You seem to have a type. Was lying in bed watching a movie and too lazy to move. Saw a small harmless spider drop down from a thread on the ceiling, obviously heading for the far side of my bed. Even if it wasn't venomous I didn't want to share my bed with it, but also didn't want to move. Not thinking it'd actually do anything I reached out my arm towards it, but still quite a few feet away, and started waving my fingers at it in annoyance. To my absolute surprise it immediately stopped its descent and actually retracted back up its line while I was sitting there in surprise. Took me a couple of seconds to realize that my hand must have looked like the most giant freaking spider he'd ever seen, standing on its back legs and waving the front 5 and the frick off or I'll wreck you dance. I started out in the normal math class until my teacher realized I should switch to the advanced class because I got perfect scores on everything. We were just about to start the chapter about telling time when I made the switch. The advanced math class already knew how to tell time. I had all digital clocks at my house. I didn't actually learn how to tell time till I was about to start high school and thought I should learn. Don't worry bro, I still can't sight read analog clocks. If I ever need to use one, I have to use my finger to point up to it and count the hours and minutes. I don't remember learning it in school and I missed some of 2nd grade, so I guess that's why. I've tried to teach myself but it just never sticks. So digital it is. I held a stick straight up in the air while pretending to be a magical creature and then it immediately started raining heavily. When I was a kid, I got a shoebox and filled it with some sand, a pile of sugar, and a few ants, like 3 or 4. I brought that box into the house and put it in my cabinet. I forgot about the box for like 2 days. When I went to check the box, because I thought the ants couldn't get out, I saw something that still seemed insane to me. But I know what I saw. A military-style formation of ants, in a large rectangle, sorted by sizes with the smallest ones in front. Like 2, might have been 4. Big ones in front of the others facing the formation. The large ones were facing away from the cabinet doors. The ants remained still for like 2 or 3 seconds then scattered in every direction. You ruined their boot camp graduation ceremony. I legit found a $100 bill on the ground. I couldn't believe it myself, but I took it straight to the ATM and it was accepted. I used to work at a movie theater and found a $100 bill on the floor of the bathroom, but an old man had just left, so I ran out and asked if it was his. He said it was, so I gave it back. When he opened his wallet, it had a lot of other big bills, so I think he was telling the truth. Got a hole-in-one playing golf by myself with no one else around me on the course. Most of my friends take my word it, but still give me a hard time saying it never happened. Watched an ant pick up its injured friend with its 2 front legs and ran away on its last 2 legs like a human would. My old boss has a NXIVM brand. I saw it when she reached up to get something and panicked because it just seems rude to point out the branded skin on another person. I immediately recognized the symbol and it was surreal. I was immersed in podcasts and stuff about that at the time. My wife has an artifact, reflective metallic nose ring looking object, embedded in her lower left rib cage between the bone and fatty tissue. It was discovered after an MRI for unrelated issue. The owls. When my grandpa passed away in November of 2008, I was at my dad's house. The front yard is almost enclosed by pine trees. I kept hearing weird noises, so I decided to go outside and see what it was. We shone a light on the trees and was greeted by many pairs of eyes. There had to be at least 20 owls just hanging out in the trees. My grandpa had an interesting way with birds and we had a very close bond. That was the only time the owls had ever been to our house. Until my mastiff passed away last year. I was home alone, brushing my teeth when I heard the familiar sound. I thought I was going crazy, but no, there they were, owls in the trees. A completely different time of year. 12 years later, the owls keep watch. Teach us your ways, O chosen one of owls. Johnny Sins took a picture of me and my wife in Maui on our honeymoon. I chickened out of asking for a pic. Must have liked being behind the camera for once. I saw David Wenham, Ferramit, Lotta, at a cafe downtown. He was just walking by with someone I assume may have been a friend or partner. You just don't get celebrities where I live very often. I told one of my mates and he didn't believe me. It was him. Sean Astin, Goonies, Lotta, Stranger Things, was in my bar one night. I was outside sneaking a quick smoke when he randomly walked up, hugged me and said, "You got this." I didn't even recognize him at first until someone mentioned who he was and I closed his tab. I was the only bartender and had been at capacity for 6 hours. My grandmother once spent a week in New York watching musicals with friends, etc. She told me that she was walking across the park by herself and ripped her purse. 2 very nice men helped her get her things together and then insisted on getting a pic of the 3 of them for her grandkids. It was Sean Astin and Elijah Wood. She had no idea. This is pretty sad, but the night my mom died, I lived in the same house, sleeping down the hall. I was asleep and I suddenly woke up to a cold sinking feeling. I went into my living room to check on my mom and she took her final breath soon after. There was no way my body could have known as I couldn't hear nor see her from my room. I keep waking up to my lights flickering at 5:55 am. It's been about 7+ times and nobody believes me. Just moved into this house a few months ago. If it happens again, I'm getting a camera installed. Totally believable. Probably a local business automatically starting up some kind of machinery causing a power sag, like a miniature temporary but reoccurring brownout. When I was a kid, 10, I went to the library with my sister, 12, and my mom. My sister and I doing the usual walking up and down the rows of books finding whatever. Eventually we split ways and a while later, I found my mom and asked her where my sister was. She hadn't seen her, so we go looking in the last area I saw her. She wasn't there. We go to another section. Nope. The next section. Nothing. We go to the other side of the library. Nothing. We check the bathrooms, outside the doors, and do another lap around the library. Nothing. We asked the library staff if they had seen her and they hadn't, but they agreed to start looking. About 30 or so minutes has passed at this point and we are starting to panic. We continued searching every last corner of that library and now we have started shouting her name. And others are as well. I'd say an hour into it my stepdad was called and he was on his way and he was even stopping cars as they left the library parking lot. This whole time there were 15 plus people looking for her and shouting her name. If she was in that library she would have heard us. My mom was at the front desk and she picked up the phone to call the police, and my sister comes walking toward her from the kids section, completely unaware of what had happened. She said she was sitting in the kids section reading a book on skateboarding the whole time. We asked her how long she had been there and she said maybe 15 minutes. It had been over an hour since we saw her. I don't know what happened that day, but she was absolutely not in that library. We never went back. This is something that would have happened to me when I was a kid. I seriously zoned into whatever I was reading and would lose any sense of time and ability to hear anything specific happening around me. My parents and siblings would wave their hand between my book and face to break my focus to get my attention. When I was 8 years old and my sister was 7, we both had the same dream and ended up sleepwalking together in the night out into the middle of the road. Let me give you some backstory. Earlier that day we had new neighbors move into the house behind us. They had 2 daughters around our age that we quickly made friends with. Well, that night my sister and I both dreamt we're running in a field full of sunflowers, picking them for our new friends. I felt so happy and carefree in the dream, and I could see my little sister running alongside me, also picking sunflowers. Well, when we woke up, my mom and our neighbors were there telling us that we had both been sleepwalking around outside together holding hands, and about to walk into the middle of the street when my neighbors, not the ones we had just met, who had just got home, spotted us. The wife ran to grab us, while the husband ran inside his house to get his gun before going into our house to check on my mom. Because we had left the front door wide open, they thought there might have been a break-in. My mom is hard of hearing. She is completely deaf in one ear and only has about 15% of her hearing in her other ear, and wears a hearing aid but takes it off at night to sleep, which is why she never heard us go out the front door. Anyways, after we realized what had happened, we talked about everything and literally recalled all of the same details and remember seeing each other in our dreams. It's now been 20 years and we still remember everything the same and stick by our memories of that night. I'm just grateful to our neighbors because who knows what would have happened if they didn't notice us. I took a one-way flight 1,200 miles away. 7 months later I took another one-way flight back home and sat next to the same random person. I once saw a kid strangle another kid at homeschool gym class. The victim survived and the strangler showed up at class again a few weeks later. I went and watched Pirates of the Caribbean at the theater with Linkin Park after they finished their part in a concert in DC. That's awesome. Lucky you. Big fan of Linkin Park. My sister and I shared a room in HS and would get ready together most mornings without saying a word as we would just be too tired to interact. I was sitting at the vanity one morning and her on the bed when I had a sudden urge to flick my scrunchie. All I said was "watch this" and released the hairband across the room. I don't know how to explain this, but the scrunchie went right around the post of the bed, which was a sphere the size of a big fist. When I tell you, logically this should not have happened. We didn't even celebrate. All we could do was stare at each other puzzled. The silence was then broken as my dad walked in. I can only imagine how insane we looked as we tried to explain to him what just happened. Honestly, it's not that serious and this is my first post, but I think about this a lot. I once threw a frisbee into a basketball hoop from further than full court in a gym with about other 25 people in it. Not a single person saw and no one believed me. Totally believable. Disc golf throwers get it in the nets from really far distances and around obstacles like trees. So definitely possible to get it in a basketball hoop from across the gym. When my autistic brother was in the 5th grade, he would bike to school every day. He's got that thing where he's bad at normal stuff, but amazing at weird other things. One day he asks my mom if he can skip school. She says no. Without her knowing, he goes downstairs and switches his school bag with his bug-out bag, gets on his bike and dips. That afternoon my mom got a call from the school that he's absent. She puts 2 and 2 together and goes looking for him. She found him hours later in the coulee, shirtless, with a tent set up, eating fish he'd caught from the river, cleaned, and cooked over a fire. He couldn't understand why my mom was upset. I once actually had to give legit CPR to a man when he had a heart attack. He was dead when the paramedics got to the house, but the medics took over and got him back. He died again in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, but they brought him back again. If it wasn't for me, he would have never had a chance. Also, doing CPR for real is freaking exhausting. Imagine dying twice and surviving. Mine. I woke up during open heart surgery and 100% believed I had a ladder match at WrestleMania. Not mine. My mum was only a kid during the troubles in Ireland back in the day. She was walking to school one day and someone got shot beside her. The bullet ended up ricocheting and went through my ma's leg. She went on to school and was too afraid to tell my grandparents. My aunt had a creative writing class in high school where she sat either in front of or behind Dwayne Johnson. I can't remember. She said that she never talked to him because he was such a jock. My mom was in class with Keanu Reeves in high school, and she later met him again coincidentally when he went in the wrong area of a banquet hall and he bought her whole workplace drinks. She says he's as cool as people think he is. I attended the only grade 7-12 school in my city. When I was but a small 7th grader, I went to get a drink of water and watched idly as some 12th grader in a Big Bird costume a Sesame Street pogo stick down the hallway for a grad prank. Nobody believed me. My dog and I were on a walk on our local college campus one weekend and he nosed a lilac bush that was apparently full of little butterflies. They all took off into the wind and then proceeded to do a perfect little spiral around me. I was so dumbfounded by them all that I was spinning in circles trying to see them all, which probably contributed to them doing a spiral. I was making air currents with my dress, but then it culminated with them landing on my head like a crown, presumably because of the sweat. Butterflies are weird like that. My dog, by this time, is sitting nearby waiting for me to get over it and keep walking, looking majestic as heck with his own little smattering of butterflies hovering around his face. It was wild enough on its own, but then I hear this shuffling and vague gasping sound, and I look in time to see that there was some guy walking by a ways away who had apparently tripped over his own feet from staring. From his perspective it must have been surreal. I was wearing this fluffy, billowy red dress because I'd just gotten back from church, and I always walked my dog barefoot to make sure I never took him on surfaces that were too hot during the warm weather. My dog was this enormous wolf-looking husky mix, and at the time I had longish hair, so for all he knows, he walks out of the library and sees a legit Disney princess in a cloud of butterflies with a giant wolf standing guard. It was the most ethereal and fancy I've ever felt, even without knowing there was a witness. I mean, a cloud of butterflies materialized from a lilac bush to form a living crown. It was breathtaking. You all should have fell in love. Back in my drug days I was at RM Cook's house and he had just finished a batch off a day or so before and was gonna try it by slamming it. He did the plunge and about 3 seconds went by and I hear screaming coming from the cook room. I stand up and go to the room and he's grabbing his arms and face yelling loud. He stands up and knocks a burner over and spills some kind of liquid all over it and it just basically explodes half the room. He moved out of the way just enough to not get fully engulfed in the flames and only caught his pants area on fire. So I'm helping him move to the bathroom while 2 other guys are putting out the fire. Since he was a cook he actually had multiple fire extinguishers in his cook room, and they're getting it surprisingly well. I get him in the shower and I'm running water all over him and he keeps saying he's on fire. All I can see is little bits of blood from his eyes, nose and palms of his hands. His leg was kinda burnt but nothing crazy. He's screaming about being on fire still and I can't figure out WTF is up. Hospital time. Turns out he cut his M all crappy and it had lots of lye in his mix. It was seeping out his pores, eyes, nose, mouth, butt, everywhere. He was in the hospital for almost a month. Went to jail for a little over a year. Fire department still came for the fire and saw everything and got completely sober after that. He works as an off-the-books help for a caretaker at local park now. Like a guy who now works at a rehab center with a similar origin story, although his accident completely blinded him. A lady I work with wanted me to mow her lawn over the weekend and said she wouldn't be home. She gave me directions and said there's a green mower underneath her porch with a full gas can. When I got there it was empty so I went to fill it up, came back and mowed her yard. The grass was about 6 inches high and looked like it hadn't been properly taken care of in years. It took me hours because I pretty much had to go over everything multiple times. Monday morning she asked me why I didn't mow her lawn. I noticed people won't stop a person who's accidentally mowing the wrong lawn. I was once in an auto parts store and one guy in the stock shelves calls out Shelly. Then someone starts talking about Candy Mountain. One customer starts quietly singing the Candy Mountain song. I start in with Magic Liar Pluridan talk, and we're all having an awesome time. Except this one customer. He has no clue what the frick is happening. He sets down the box of something or other he's holding and backs away to the exit, trying not to let any of us out of his sight as he makes his escape. He probably thought you all were in a psycho cult and were chanting something before getting ready to sacrifice him. I saw my mom's 2 pet dogs, miniature poodles, having a human-like conversation, moving their little mouths and coming to some type of agreement. Ah yes, they speak on the dog frequency. OMG, finally, I was at a local jazz bar club. After enjoying a few cocktails I have the urge to use the ladies' room. So I walk in, plop my butt down on the toilet when suddenly, a large woman bursts in and proceeds to pull down her pants and pee on the fricking ground. All while making eye contact with me and while my pee was still coming out. I was in shock, and all she said was, "Oh girl, I just couldn't hold it any longer." It was so surreal. I just walked out. Didn't wipe and didn't wash my hands. I was shook to the core. Oh, forgot about this one. I live in Belfast, Ireland, and one day I was walking to work with my earphones in listening to Fozzy. Turned a corner and there was the lead singer and WWE superstar Chris Jericho. Even showed him my phone and that I was halfway through a song so he didn't think I was bullshitting. Anyway, spoke for about 30 minutes. Taught him some Irish Gaelic phrases and took photos. He even posted me on his Instagram. On a bit similar note, in one flat that I rented, I had a shower with FM radio, so I listened to music every morning when I showered. I put on a rock station and one day, while I was washing my hair, I hear this song is debuting in a station jingle, so I jokingly say to myself, yeah, it will be Judas by Fozzy. It was Judas by Fozzy. My friend and I were just sitting outside a 7-Eleven with some 40s and a packed hash pipe on St. Patrick's Day back in like 09 or 08. We were pretty loaded when this Ford Explorer came tearing around the corner like a bat out of heck. He sideswiped a whole row of parked cars, which tore his bumper and a bunch of other crap off his car. The dude stumbled out of his car, picked up as much of his broken car as he could and stuck it in the back, got back in his car and took off. We were standing there, totally blown away, when less than a minute later a cop came tearing around the same corner. He asked us if we saw what happened. We said yeah, and he asked us to come with him to it the guy. So we grabbed our 40s and the hash pipe and hopped in the back of the cruiser. I asked the cop if I could smoke a cigarette, and he said I could. So then I told him that because of my MMJ card I could smoke cannabis anywhere I could smoke a cigarette. And he just cracked the windows a bit as we hauled absolute butt down the main boulevard, roasting hash and chugging 40s the whole way. The Explorer was pulled over a couple miles away. The cop pulled over and we all got out, still smoking the hash. We give our statements between puffs and swigs. They confirmed the story since the guy had his bumper in the back like we explained, and the paint transfer and everything matched the story. The cop dropped us back off at 7-Eleven, at which point we had to buy some more beer and pack another hash bowl. That was a frickin' crazy night. This sounds like a great stoner movie, like Superbad, but they're in their 20s now. Saw a guy score off of another guy's face in basketball. The ball was going out of bounds, he saved it and it hit a guy in the face and somehow went upward off of the guy's face and into the basket. For a second I didn't believe what happened, but the 15-20ish guys in the gym all went crazy at once. I saw a plane fall out of midair once. It just stopped and tumbled to the ground. Small plane, not commercial obviously. It wasn't too close and I was at camp so didn't investigate, but it's def happened. Midair stall. I saw a morbidly obese lady in a Walmart operating a rascal run over a midget on Black Friday. If it was in a movie I would have thought it absurd. Morbidly obese, Walmart, I believe you. I, a totally average nerdy teenager in the late 80s, hooked up with a famous blonde sitcom star a few years older than me in a NYC nightclub I wasn't even old enough to be in legally and ended up having my one and only one night stand. Given the way both of us looked at the time, it's not worth telling anyone that I know it happened because they would never believe it. The one good friend I told back when I was in college, instead of responding with any sort of disbelief or claiming I was lying, instead said I never really thought she was hot. Tell us who. We have no reason not to believe you. It's about my family. Quick backstory. I was adopted at birth, and those parents died and I was adopted again by a different family when I was 11. I was cut off from my first adoptive family after my parents died and got back in contact with some of that family in 2018. All of this I learned from them. TLDR. At bottom. Starting with my parents. They were second cousins apparently. My mom hired her brother to shoot and kill my dad when I was a baby, except he was unsuccessful and my dad lived with a bullet in his chest until the day he died 10 years later. I felt the bullet. You could feel it. It was gross. He died from an insulin overdose and I'm almost positive my mom killed him. My uncle who shot my dad? In prison until he died. Not from shooting my dad, but for killing a man accidentally. This is what he said. Putting the body in a truck and abandoning it. My aunt is also a lady of crime. She embezzled $500,000 from the hospital she worked at. Obviously, she got jail time. I have no reason for anyone to believe me. I have no proof. And trust me, I was in shock when my cousins were telling me all this. TLDR. I found out my dead mom and dead dad were second cousins, and she likely killed him. My uncle killed a man and was hired to kill my dad. My aunt stole $500,000. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.